introduce Professor Cesar Hidalgo. Mr. Hidalgo, are you here already? Awesome.
I'm here.
Perfect. Then let me just say a few words about the work of Mr. Hidalgo. Mr. Hidalgo is a scholar known for his contributions to economic complexity, data visualization, and applied artificial intelligence. Hidalgo leads currently the Center for Collective Learning at the Artificial and Natural Intelligence Institute of the University of Toulouse. He is also an honorary professor at the University of Manchester and a visiting professor at Harvard School of Engineering and Applied Science. Further, between 2010 and 2019, Hidalgo led MIT's Collective Learning Group, climbing through the ranks from assistant to associate professor. I think a video or a talk that Hidalgo became popular for and that I also watched and it really challenged me was his TED talk about whether humans can be, or whether politicians could be replaced by AI. This very much shows that Mr. Hidalgo is not only into the technology and into the details of how artificial intelligence works, but he also looks at the bigger picture and potential application opportunities for society of artificial intelligence. And therefore, I'm very happy to give the stage to Professor Hidalgo. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'm looking forward to your talk.
Thank you. So it's a pleasure for me to be here. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay, great. So I think you're gonna be happy with what I'm gonna show you today, because of course it connects a little bit with what I presented in TED in 2018. And also I'm very happy to hear that that talk had an impact, because I knew that when I was going on a limb presenting that idea on Vancouver that day, I was targeting people that were younger than me, because I do believe that this idea that a distributed digital democracy should be possible is an idea that people in younger generations believe more, and you need that belief to be able to create, to be able to explore those paths of creation. So what I'm going to show today is one of those paths, and this path, it's actually one that we started exploring in 2019 in a very particular situation. So I don't know how many of you know about this, but in November 15 of 2019, Chile signed an agreement to start a new constitution. Okay, basically, politicians met at dawn at a time of chaos, and they signed, a two-page agreement that said that, the country was going to commit to start a new constitutional process in which a new constitution is going to be written from scratch, from a white page, and that was on November 15. But, why did the politicians did that? Is it because they just woke up that day and they felt like it? Of course not. There was a lot of pressure, because if you go back 4 weeks before that, what had happened is that, a student protest that had started as a way to rebel against, an increase on subway fare increased, massively. And in a matter of, 48 hours, we ended up in a country in which more than 70 subway stations had been burned or vandalized. There was a curfew with the military on the streets. There was police violence, there was looting, there was the whole set of things. And people that woke up, from that like dream, all of a sudden, they realized that the country was now, going in a very different direction. But what was the way out of this situation? Nobody knew, because the thing is, this movement was what is known in the literature as a network social movement. Network social movements, like the ones that we observed in the Arab Spring, in the Indignados, in Occupy Wall Street, or in Chile in 2019, are movements that are coordinated thanks to social media. So people have the ability to say, okay, everybody's going to go to the same part of the city at this time and is going to protest. But these movements, they don't have the previous deliberation, canvassing, and so forth that allows them to articulate ideas. So on the one hand, the internet has given people an amazing ability to connect to others and to organize mobilizations. On the other hand, these massively mobilized populations have struggled to articulate ideas. So these network social movements, even though they're all different, they also share a lot of commonalities. You know, they distrust political parties, they distrust traditional media, they reject formal organization, they reject traditional leadership. And if you put that together, basically, you know, you realize that it's very hard to articulate a movement's grievances. You know, these movements basically, you know, gather a lot of people, but what do they really want? How do the things that they want compare to those of the general population? You know, it's really hard to know. So what I did is, well, you know, at that time, you know, as we observed, you know, what was unfolding in Chile, I have a software company called DataWheel, which is about 30 people. We have many people that actually are engineers that work in Chile, and they were concerned about the situation. So we said, you know what? Let's create a platform to try to understand what's happening. You know, everybody in social media is shouting at each other that is this, is that, you know, but like, can we actually get people to collaborate by creating a different form of participation that is more guardrail and that enable people from, you know, the mobilized population and the non-mobilized population to participate in a collaborative exercise. So this is more or less the timeline of the events that I'm describing. There was a first student protest on Thursday, October 17 of 2019. You know, by, you know, Friday, October 18, that night, 70 subway stations were damaged, vandalized, you know, tons of supermarkets, you know, were looted. You know, Saturday, October 19, you know, so imagine 2 days later, first curfew, military on the street, you know, and then the next week, as we were all still in shock, we decided to build a platform on Wednesday, and we launched this platform on Thursday, you know, and, you know, that platform became very popular for the 2 weeks that came after that. And, you know, basically 3 weeks after the platform was launched, there was this agreement to sign a new constitution. And we're going to see that actually we had the data to explain, you know, and to predict that that was the grievance that the population was disagreeing about. So how did the platform work? Well, the platform, you know, was based on pair comparisons. What are pair comparisons? Pair comparisons are a technique that was developed by Leon Thurston. Leon Thurston was an American psychologist, originally trained as a mechanical engineer, that was actually very successful opening many branches of research that helped transform qualitative judgments into quantitative data. And one of the things that he did is, you know, in the 1920s, he thought that, you know, people had different value judgments for different types of crimes, like rape and homicide and abortion and kidnapping and burglary and libel. They were not all the same, but, you know, how could you quantify which crimes were worse and how much worse they were and which crimes were similar? So what he did is he grabbed a list of 19 crimes, he arranged them into all possible pairs, and he asked his students to underline, you know, the crime that they consider worse in each pair, okay? And this allowed him to create, for example, like this, you know, table that you see here on the right, you know, in which you would like basically get not only a ranking of all of the crimes, but also you get kind of like a scale. So you see, for example, rape and homicide are much worse, you know, than seduction, abortion, and kidnapping. And for example, vagrancy is not considered too much of a bad crime, okay? So this idea, even though it's almost 100 years old, it has revived recently because like about a decade ago, I started using it to quantify people's perception of the urban environment. And since then, it has been a popular method in crowdsourcing. It's, you know, the idea that it's also in the All Our Ideas platform from Matt Salganik, in the Model Machine Experiment from Iyad and colleagues, you know, and we had this experience, you know, that we could build on. You know, in this case, you know, what we have done is a series of papers in which we had first collected data on people's perception of the urban environment, and then we trained machine learning models to, you know, predict people's preferences. So we could build on this idea. We were comfortable with the technology. We had done it before. So basically we created, you know, a very simple version, you know, of a platform that was optimized for mobile. We knew that, you know, this was going to be for people that are mobilized on the streets. This was going to be for people that, you know, were watching like protests at home and they were using their phone or their laptops, you know, and the platform, you know, would basically just put, you know, 2 proposals chosen at random. You know, it would say, what would you prioritize? And then people would click on one item of a pair, or would indicate no preference, and then would get another item of a pair. So this is actually, you know, a design that is very different from that of a survey, because the things that we're going to learn from the data are emergent phenomena. You know, like you're not asking people whether they think adding bicycle lanes is controversial or not. You're going to see whether that item, you know, is controversial if it's an item that helps you cluster or divide the population, you know? So you have kind of like these emergent properties, and you have also people collaborating in this exercise of prioritization. So when people come to the site, they don't choose on what to vote. They're forced to always choose among pairs from this set and contribute to this large matrix that we're all populating collectively. So just to make sure that you understand sort of like the underlying idea, this is just like writing, proposals in cards, so imagine you write these proposals on physical cards, and then you arrange those cards, in a stack, and that stack is arranged from the highest priority to lowest priority. And what you do in this website is you open this stack in such a way that people can come and start flipping pairs of cards by giving you information of which card they think should be on top of the other one in a pair. And you open this to thousands of hands that start participating, and that's how you get these rankings. So who participated? Well, we had about 7 million preferences and 150,000 people that participated in 2 weeks, So if you have like, big peaks of traffic, in which we're collecting, 170,000 preferences an hour, when, this appears in the news, when this appears, on television, when this, made it front page news in a newspaper and so forth. So we enjoyed a lot of participation. Actually, in terms of participation, I would say if it's not, it's very close to being the most successful in terms of volume when it comes to a participation platform deployed organically during a network social movement, during a time of chaos, not during an election, but basically during a time in which people are burning things in barricades on the middle of the street. But this volume of participation, of course, had certain characteristics. So people would self-report their gender, their age, and other characteristics. And for instance, here we can compare the participation of people in Chile Clase, the demographic pyramid, compared to that of, the general population. So the general population is these symbols that are, empty, and the participation in Chile Clase is the ones that are filled. And you see that Chile Clase skews towards males, and people over 80 do not participate too much, or over 75, but we can compare that with other forms of participation. So for instance, when we look at downtown protesters, the entropy of that distribution is much lower, meaning that, it's a distribution that is less uniform, it's less across multiple categories, because basically downtown protest was mostly people below 29, mostly 18 to 24. They were a big fraction, like between men and women below 24, you have 30% of all protesters. So they're very overrepresented. If you look at Congress is very male, So the only thing that does better, is the actual presidential election. So this is not bad news, It tells us, hey, when it comes to demographic composition, this online platform is not more biased, it's actually less biased than protest, is less biased than the actual representative body of the country. Now, who participated now from a political perspective? And here, in red, you can see the population of Chile, so there's people in the left, there's people in the center left, there's people in the right, there's people on the, center right. This is based on a national representative survey. In blue, you see the people that participated on the protest, they're all on the left and there are very few on the right. And in orange, you see the distribution of Chile Clase, and it tends to be much closer to the distribution of the general population, because in this platform, not only the people that were mobilized participated, but also the people that were watching at home. So we're going to be able to compare, like mobilized opinions with those of the non-mobilized, which also should count. People are a little bit tempted to forget about that. So what were the lessons? What did we learn? Okay, so what we wanted to understand were agreements and disagreements. We have dozens of policy issues, that we're evaluating here. Some issues may provide points of intersection, and we hope that maybe, this can help us unite mobilized and non-mobilized populations. So that would be great. We find something that everyone agree on. Can we rally people behind that? That was our original idea. I think it was wrong, because actually you cannot differentiate among opposing groups when you have these consensus type issues. So, if I am from the left and I agree that pension reform is really important, and people on the right also think that pension reform is really important, that doesn't differentiate me from them. That doesn't provide me with a sense of identity. So agreements, unfortunately, don't provide traction. The ones that were getting all of the traction, and we're going to see that later, are the disagreements, which help us understand differences between the mobilized and the non-mobilized population. And we can actually quantify how strong this social order fracture is, because now we have a quantitative method to say, hey, people are disagreeing, but are they disagreeing like when an 80% strength or 20% strength? We're going to be able to measure those strengths, because we have hundreds of thousands of preferences that are given, by hundreds of thousands of people. So in the regional platform, we would show, the high priority and the low priority proposals, but we soon learned that divisiveness was more important. So for instance, this is when you look at the proposals as scored only in population of people that self-reported from the left, or only among the people that self-reported from the right. And you see that, of course, there is some correlation. So for example, this number one proposal that has high consensus, it's popular on the left and on the right, but there are things here that have a lot of dissensus. They have disagreement, they're divisive. So for example, new constitution is actually the number one item with, about 90% approval, among people on the left. What that disapproval means that, when you show this item in a pair, 90% of the times people chose new constitution, no matter what was on the other side. Now, if you look at people on the right, they chose new constitution about 22% of the time, meaning that about 80% of the time they chose whatever else was not new constitution. So this is a huge divisiveness. So you can think that this distance between, the point and, the diagonal, is a measure of how divisive that issue is. These issues here, they're not divisive, they're popular, they have consensus. These issues here, people don't care about, but they're not divisive. And these issues, that are far from the diagonal are the ones that are dividing the population. We learned that divisiveness is actually political, it's not demographic, because there's a lot of conversation today about demographics. But for example, we compare like preference between males and females, or people that live in the capital, people that live outside the capital, people that are younger, people that are older. Sure, we observe some things that are associated with some level of disagreement, but not as strong as the one that we observe, when we look at, political division. So this divisiveness, if you think of it as kind of like how low the R square is, when you look at the political divisiveness, you have like, an R square of 12%. In the other dimensions, you have 90, 75, 90%. So we basically have a situation in which the divisiveness is actually political. It's not demographic. It's not, a fight in this case between male and females, older and younger people. It's people from different ideologies. Now, can we measure divisiveness without the self-reported data? Because we ask people to self-report their gender, their age, their location, their political orientation, but a lot of people didn't do that. It's completely voluntary, it's completely anonymous. So we can actually measure divisiveness purely behaviorally by looking at the difference in score among the people that selected a proposal on top of another one, minus the score on people that selected the other, not the proposal, and averaging it over all pairs, And if we do that, in Chile, we recover, the divisiveness that we observe in that political chart, and we get like a score. So for example, new constitution, how divisive it is, 72%. What that does mean that if you evaluated with the people that didn't want it and the people that did want it, you get a difference in score of 72%. So let's say if in the people that didn't want it, it scored a 10% success rate, 10% of the time people choose new constitution. Among the people that wanted, they're choosing it, 82% of the time. There's a 72% difference. So it's huge effect, a lot of polarization, that we can quantify for each one of these measures. For instance, you have Constitutional Assembly that is very similar. Ending of the curfew. The people that are watching at home that are scared about the violence and what's going on, they see the curfew as a necessary, condition to keep the social order. The people that are mobilized in the street, they see the curfew as a form of oppression, also hugely divisive. So we can capture this divisiveness very well, And because we launched this project at the time that I was teaching at Harvard at the School of Engineering, I had students approach me from Georgia, from Lebanon, Colombia, and we developed platforms also in other countries. One of those countries was Lebanon, and the platform was quite popular in Lebanon. And actually, we also got, over 300,000 preferences there, but we also focused that platform, on the consensus, on the things that people agreed were most relevant. But we could use this divisiveness metric now to understand what were the things that actually people disagreed in Lebanon. Things like decriminalizing LGBT individuals, eliminate political sectarianism, or the woman's right to pass citizenship to children. So a different conflict than the one of Chile. The one of Chile was a very institutional conflict. Here you see a conflict that also has a lot of social policy components, So even though, the platforms technically work in the same way technologically, different populations, different proposals were extracting different signals. And now to conclude, well, in 2018, I presented in Vancouver in TED main stage this idea of augmented democracy. So now I had an opportunity to explore, well, how well can we predict people's preferences in these platforms, because these are very sparse matrices, okay? So imagine that with 90 proposals, you have 4,005 possible pairs. So what we can do is we can see how well we can predict, like people's preferences by creating a testing set, by creating a training set, and by seeing how well, a model, trained on the training set can predict preferences that we hid from the training set and including the testing set. We're going to use the simplest, most stupid form of machine learning, multiplying a matrix by the transpose to finding the similarity of people. I'm going to say, you're going to vote similar to the people that are similar to you, and you're going to vote opposite to the people that vote opposite to you. And this gives us a confidence score, because if you have a lot of people that are similar to you and that have voted on the same issue, you're going to have high confidence that you have a good signal to make that prediction. But if it's mixed, and you're similar to some people, but also to other ones that voted differently, that signal is going to be smaller, so you have kind of like this W value, which is this weight. So what we can do is we can say, okay, we don't want to predict everything. Let's say that we want to predict, a certain fraction of the data set. So for instance, here, we want to predict, like about 23% of the data set. That's a lot because these matrices are about 1% full, okay? So when you're going to 20%, you are 20xing, the size of the data set. And we can augment participation by more than a factor of 10 with an accuracy of about 85%. So you can really augment this data. You can go from like 40 preferences that people give you to 400 preferences out of, 4,000 with a high level of accuracy, and that's something that validates this idea that in principle, you could use machine learning to augment participation to basically extract more knowledge and information out of the data that people provide in this nuanced participatory instance. But there was, of course, politics, like anything that becomes popular becomes political. That's kind of like a universal rule. And what happens is that as this thing became, popular, at the beginning, people loved it, then people hated it. And then, of course, people started to make stories, People on the left started to say that this was a platform created by the right to delegitimize the movement in the streets, to replace it with a digital form. And of course, that was not true. People on the right started to say, look, this platform was prepared in advance by the Latin American left, by the Chavez regime, by people in Cuba to destabilize the country. So don't participate in this platform created by communists to destabilize the country that they have been preparing for months and months, with that motivation. Of course, that was not true. This was something that was born in a basement, literally from one day to the next, with a group of citizens with, ability to create, platforms for digital participation and data distribution. What the project really was a digital participation platform built, in 24 hours to help understand a network social movement, a movement that is leaderless, that reject formal organization, and that has problems articulating solutions. And also, it is an illustration that digital democracy is not e-voting, but it's an opportunity to decide participation instances that are high frequency and volume and that can focus on issues rather than candidates. So it's not about digitizing what we do today, that paper type voting, that works well. It's about, being able to explore a design space that is much larger, that allows us to do, different forms, of participation that would be impossible to do with pen and paper. It would be impossible to do like Thurston experiment at a country scale. It would be, too many pens, too many papers, and too much time, for people just to simply do this and tally things by hand. So it's about, exploring what you can do with digital means that you cannot do today with the physical ones. It's not about replacing one with the other, but about expanding the possibilities of participation. And let's fast forward now to 2021. This has been a couple of years since we did this platform. We've learned a lot since, we've analyzed the data. We've had an opportunity to think about how this relates to other things. But in between, the process in Chile kept on moving, and the Constitutional Assembly started operating on July 4. There was first a referendum to start the process. There was an election of, candidates, and then, this assembly started to operate. And we're now, working with the official website of the Constitutional Assembly to release a different platform, a platform that we have been working on, not for, a couple of hours, but that we have been working on for many, many, many months, that focuses on helping people build their own constitution. So we've been working with lawyers, with designers to create these giant decision trees that allows people to play mini games that help write constitutional paragraphs by recombining the things that appear in actual constitutions of different parts of the world. And with that, I would like to thank you for your time. I hope that you enjoyed the presentation, and happy to hear your questions and discuss. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hidalgo, for this really impressive presentation. And I must say, a lot of thoughts and questions are running through my head. It kind of reminded me a bit of social media. So I see what my friends kind of like, and social media assumes that I like similar things. And I have a lot of questions about the implementation, about how this tool is working. But I also see that our audience has several questions, and of course I would rather give the word to our audience. So let me pose to you the first question of our chat. The first question is, who can actually manage the implementation of those tools at a large scale? I guess it rather refers to who decides in a government to use those tools.
Okay. So I think I wouldn't narrow it down like as who use it in the government, because in some sense, if you do that, you're assuming the answer rather than asking the broader question. So the broader question is, who can manage these type of tools? And they're very different models. The model that we have pursued so far is kind of like a triple model in which we have different partners. So we provide the technology, and we provide also our experience creating and launching platforms in different geographies. But we don't provide the content. We then partner with a local organization, which usually comes to us. For example, in Paraguay, we're doing now a platform like this for the election for mayor. And there's a local think tank that is interested on like civic issues, is interested on the city of Asunción. And they create the content, they write about, they create the proposals. And then there is another partner, which is a media partner, in this case, a newspaper, that puts this as part of the content to get people to participate and to promote that participation. So at the moment, I don't think you want to put these instances, in large city governments or country scale governments. They're going to get attacked, they're going to get delegitimized. You want to put them in small settings, you want to do it with multiple partners, and you want to present them as opportunities for civic education, learning, collaborative deliberation. One of the ideas, for example, that I think is very important in this collaborative deliberation, and that we observed, for example, in Chilecracia, is that a lot of people told me that they didn't do Chilecracia alone. They would do it with their family on their smart TV or in their computer, and they would be discussing, the options that they were seeing and why they would want, or what do they thought they meant, and so forth. And that deliberation, I think, it's powerful, and is what these tools can help provide. But you don't want to try to push this as a binding decision-making mechanism. You want to push this as a form of civic participation that is, organic, is deliberative, it sparks conversations. You can use these proposals, for instance, to, ask people that are running for office, like why do you think this issue is divisive? Or would you agree on, on this proposal being a priority for the population? And by using them like in that more lax form, in that more collaborative form, not just a pure decision-making mechanism, but a more of, a collective self-awareness mechanism, you can, I think, get more mileage out of this, and you can learn, because I think there is a lot that we need to learn, in this path of how to develop user interfaces and user experiences for digital participation.
Very, very interesting. So basically, it can also serve as a basis for decisions or policy decisions and policymakers of politicians. Maybe just one question to clarify: if we would now use your fast forward slide and again fast forward for 10 more years, would you see that those AI processes, or in generally those models, might have direct impact on a decision, or do you in generally see this technology rather as a participatory option for citizens to basically
the politicians cannot afford not to care about anything that is popular and that aggregates some people's opinions. So when Chile Clase was going viral and it was like the talk of the town for 2 weeks in Chile, I was getting contacted by politicians from the left and the right, hey, like, what do you think? And they all wanted to talk to me, because they wanted to know where they should position themselves when they were speaking to the population. So even though that's not something that they're going to admit in public, I privately observed it, and I was getting, my phone, my WhatsApp was exploding with this type of request and things like that. So also, people, journalists, they like the idea, they like the project, and they would invite politicians to talk into their shows, the morning shows, radio shows, and they would say, okay, look, the top 10 things in Chile Clase are this. That's what we're going to talk about today. So I think those are things that are quite impactful if you think about it, that it's basically defining, like the agenda for a day for, a political journalism news show. It's also, something that the politicians themselves are in Congress saying, oh shit, maybe I should pay attention to this. It's giving them kind of like some sort of like awakening moment that there might be other ways, to communicate with the population at scale other than, the way that they do it right now, and I do see that, being something that we're gonna learn throughout this decade more and more, but in bursts. I do think that politics is bursty, like it is a news cycle world in which the news cycle moves very fast, and I don't think we're going to get anytime soon at a place in which, what the platform chooses or what people choose on the platform is what gets implemented, but we're going to get into worlds in which, more and more people are listening to these aggregators, because what social media doesn't have, what Twitter cannot do, what Facebook cannot do, is that it's a cacophony of people speaking natural language. And if you're saying the same thing as someone else, it's hard to know. It doesn't aggregate. You're saying something that is an exact opposite. It's also hard to know. You're doing something that is completely different. It's hard to know because they don't aggregate. So what we do here is we force, this collaboration into one big data set of, preferences, instead of having kind of like this gigantic collection of text that is very unwieldy when it comes to like, look at like the proposals, look at how people think about them, look at what causes agreement and disagreement.
Thank you so much. Very detailed answer to this very important and interesting question. I would like to ask another question out of the audience, and maybe we can even combine two questions. One person asked, do you see the dangers, or do you see any dangers of adopting those tools? And maybe we can kind of pose this question together with the question another person asked, is we hear a lot about manipulations of opinion building in the digital sphere. Wouldn't augmented democracy, digital participation, even aggravate these dangers? What is your take on
there's
that?
A lot of dangers, of course. And every time you have a technology that has power, you have kind of like some sort of arm race between the benefits and, the risks that you're going to have. So for instance, like just to give you an idea, like in Chile, we did get a lot of cyber attacks, they were not very sophisticated. They added noise. They were just, people trying to troll stuff around, but there were many, attacks that we received, injecting random votes or trying to do things to our platform. So you see it emerge in Lebanon, in Colombia, that we were not that popular. There were no attacks of that sort. So of course, there is kind of like at a certain level of popularity, you start now encountering those type of problems, and you do have like risk, because I think in the instances that we've done and the way that we have been deploying the projects, has always been with people that are very reasonable and honestly they're trying to contribute. But you could see that one of these platforms could be grabbed by an extremist group. They can basically bias all of the proposals that they put in a certain direction, and start kind of like to use this to drum up a perception of let's say xenophobia among the population or things like that. So legitimizing these tools is difficult, because it's in a space in which there are many actors that could interfere with them on different ways and so forth. And I don't think it's a pure technical solution, the development of trusted digital democracy platforms and tools, it's also about, having, trusted teams, having trusted instances that start developing reputation and that earn, that trust slowly over time by, executing projects, by developing norms, and by starting to develop kind of like the sort of Carta Magna constitution of how these things have to operate and how to get them to operate, correctly and in a way that is fair, that it makes it hard to cheat on, that it makes it hard to hack, and so forth. So there are a lot of risks, but in some way, you're not going to get the benefits that these things can give you if you don't go digital. If you don't go digital, you're going to keep on having very low throughput elections that are going to be episodic and they're going to be over few choices. If you want to move to high frequency, high number of choices, you have to change the form of voting, and you have to change the way in which people vote. So by the form, I say you don't want to be doing like choose one of these lists like we do right now, or rank-based voting either doesn't scale to 100 items. You're going to have to go, beyond in the way that people vote, and through the platform that they vote, you're going to have to go digital. You're going to have to go into things like pair comparisons, into things like what we're doing in, the Constitutional Assembly, into things like Polis has done, because you have to have these new user experience paradigms, and that's sort of like the benefit, but all of the risks are going to be there. And it's an arm race between the ones that want to use this force for good and the ones that want to use this force not for good. Now, if we don't figure out how to do a distributed digital democracy by ourselves as citizens, all of the tools of, big data and surveillance are still going to be deployed and used by our current systems, by our current, representative democracy. So there's also kind of like that type of risk that, hey, if we don't figure out distributed way, we're going to have more and more, government surveillance. Like today, everywhere I scan my COVID pass. I love that. I think it's okay. But I do understand that, basically the government of France knows that I was at this conference this day, knows that I went to McDonald's, like we're getting to kind of like this form of surveillance democracy, which is growing, and and we're going to have to go one way or another. We are going to have like a big data democracy based on representatives and a government that knows a lot about us, and that, in which we have little participation other than choosing a few representatives at the top level, or we're going to develop a distributed system that allows us to, basically put many more of those decisions in the hand of citizens, but we're going to have to figure out how to deal with a lot of these risks, errors, like false accounts, lack of participation, etc.
Thank you so much. And looking at the time, I hope it is still okay to ask one more question, because our first conference, as I said, was very much about innovating the voting system and innovating the electoral system. And you have just touched upon changing the way we vote. So the question is, because I kind of want to look back at our first conference and would love to hear more opinions about it, what is your opinion about models that increase the directness of democracy, such as just direct democracy, quadratic voting, liquid democracy, etc.? Do you think this could increase the lack of participation that you have just mentioned?
So the question is like, when and where you want to deploy those models, so do you want to have a direct democracy system for, deciding whether the United States start a nuclear war? Probably not. Do you want to have a direct democracy system, in budget, expenses that are related to, community improvements? Probably yes. You have a lot of participatory budgeting instances, but the interface are broken that basically if you're not on page one as a project, you don't get elected, So that also, like from a user experience, from a UX perspective, they're wrong, they're failed. And I think that's, where we want to go. So we have to understand when and where we want to deploy this. But even when we understand when and where, we say like, yes, people should have an input on community improvements, like basically your neighborhood improvements under budget. But can we figure out like a good way of doing it? Because just, using one of the platforms that are out there and having, paginated lists of projects that people can like, it's not a good way of doing it. So there is research to be done there as well. So a little bit kind of like that is my answer. Is not that this is gonna, you know, improve or not. Is it has to be deployed strategically. You know, like any tool, there's gonna be some situations in which, you know, this might be an improvement. There might be another situation in which this actually, you know, could not work well. And we need to understand the difference. And I think, you know, over time, you know, if more people start doing research on this, if we start doing more little pilot experiments, I believe that this is something that has to occur at small scales. You know, small company can have digital democracy for certain decisions. You know, a small village can do that. You know, a scientific community, for example, in a conference, they want to decide, you know, who the next keynote speaker should be, and they run a list, you know, through like the peer comparison platform. Like, and through all of those instances, we're going to start learning when and why this should be used, when it works, when it fails, and so forth. So it's not a universal yes or no. It depends, and let's try to figure out together. It depends on what and why.
Thank you so much for your view on this. And conclusively, I want to thank you, Professor Hidalgo, for attending today's conference. I think it was a very valuable, insightful presentation. We will also be soon sharing it or sharing the video with you. Thank you so much for attending. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. I do have a meeting soon, so I'm gonna log out if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Bonne journée. Merci.
Bonne journée. Salut, to
Au revoir.
Paris.